Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to welcome you here today, to all of our students and faculty and staff colleagues and colleagues from far and near, from CSI here on Staten Island, from around the corner, from Wagner College, and to our guest, Dr. Tuajuanda Jordan. Welcome to Wagner College, to our third annual Black History Month Scholar Keynote Address. It is such an honor and privilege for me to welcome Tuajuanda C. Jordan, who is president of St. Mary's College of Maryland. Dr. Jordan entered academic administration in 2002 and advanced from Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences to Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs by the time she left Xavier University of Louisiana in 2005. Because of Dr. Jordan's coordinated efforts with other administrators in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, Xavier was the first institution to reopen its doors for classes. She moved on to become director of the Science Education Alliance of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And this alliance is a collaborative effort designed to have scientists and educators work together to enhance science literacy while preparing the next generation of scientists. It was during her tenure at Howard Hughes Medical Institute that I first met Dr. Jordan, and I was quite impressed with her on many levels, and you will soon know why. Dr. Jordan is trained as a biochemist. She attended Fisk University for her undergraduate degree and then went on to Purdue University, where she obtained her PhD in biochemistry. She was an undergraduate scholar and a graduate fellow of the National Institutes of Health Minority Access to Research Careers, or MARC program, for which she served on the subcommittees many years later. She did her postdoc training at the University of Cincinnati School of Medicine in Cell Biophysics and Pharmacognosy. She was a tenured faculty member in the Department of Chemistry at both Xavier University of Louisiana and Lewis and Clark College, and a visiting scientist at the University of Michigan in biophysics. Over the course of her remarkable career, President Jordan has attained research grants from NIH, as well as science education grants from the National Science Foundation and several private foundations. Her research has focused on elucidating the catalytic mechanism of HMG-CoA reductase and pseudomonad and the characterization of a new unique apolipoprotein involved in the complement cascade. She explained to me earlier today that this all has to do with the development of statins to treat high cholesterol. So thank you for that important work, Dr. Jordan. In addition to her scientific publication and presentations, she's published and presented on science education. A recent innovative science publication that was the result of her science education efforts listed 192 co-authors, with more than 160 of them being undergraduates. This is the person who firmly believes in training the next generation of scientists. Her honors include being named a Purdue University Distinguished Alumna from the School of Agriculture in 2008. And in 2009, Dr. Jordan was named a Revolutionary Mind by Seed Magazine. Dr. Jordan is in the honeymoon period of her presidency. She's in the 7th month of her presidency at St. Mary's College of Maryland, which is a public liberal arts college that is completely an honors college. It is quite a remarkable place, and we have totally enjoyed sharing with you today. Dr. Jordan has been here all day speaking with faculty and students and with our president. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I now would like you to join me in welcoming Dr. Jordan as she presents her keynote address, Nature Will Find a Way.
During the course of this talk, my voice will probably get louder. You should consider me to be like an old Chevy. It takes a while to get warmed up, and then once I get warmed up, I just go, right? It has been an absolute pleasure being on this campus today. I did not know what to expect. I've never been here before, and it's been joyful. The students have been awesome, and the faculty have engaged me in these really intriguing conversations that really motivate me and energize me. And dinner was good, and I couldn't eat all my dinner. Why? Because I had to get a talk. And you don't want to go to sleep in the middle of your own talk, right? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, and I might get a little bit discombobulated here. I got lots going on, right? So if I drop something, I'll just keep going. Don't worry about it, okay? So I'm going to start, and I think probably, and I know somebody told me how to lower the lights, but I wasn't really paying attention. So if you could just lower them a little bit, and that's me. Thank you. I appreciate it. We must do everything as needed, and they just need to be loaded. No, yeah, just a little bit. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'll put it back up when you go.
Okay, so I got this title. You know how when you're in college and or somewhere and somebody's making you write a paper, and they give you a topic and say write on this, and then it just stifles you? So I saw Dr. McNair at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and she reminded me I was supposed to be here. And then she says, we need your title. And I'm like, crap. I don't know what to give as a title, but then, I started thinking about Jurassic Park, I think. You see these commercials coming on, and then in the old ones, when the velociraptors get out of control and Jeff Goldblum says, nature always finds a way. So that's where this title came from. And hopefully I will be able to connect things to this title. If not, I'm in trouble. So, it's ruining my flow. How do we get this to go? You hear the ding?
Yeah.
Dings are never good. All right, here we go, hopefully. Even though you've seen that many times, haven't you? And so this is a picture of me. And and it's about the end of 1960. And how do I know that? It's because I'm really small. And I was born in the middle of 1960, and so I'm not yet walking. So I know it must have been towards the end, and that's me with my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, Georgie and Herman Taylor. And you look at that, and you don't realize that it's actually classified as first generation, Pell eligible, underrepresented minority. It's female in segregated Virginia in 1960. That's important. And then you look at me now, and here I am, first African-American female to get a PhD in biochemistry from Purdue. First African-American director at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And Howard Hughes Medical Institute is the largest biomedical philanthropy in the country. It is the second largest in the world that really pays attention to excellent biomedical science and science education. Then I became the first African-American dean at Lewis and Clark College, one of those hoity-toity kind of liberal arts colleges in the Pacific Northwest. And finally, first African-American president of St. Mary's College of Maryland, which is one of these primarily white institutions that is also in the top 90 of the nationally ranked colleges in the country, and it's one of only 2 public honors colleges in the nation. So if you look at my beginning and where I am now, technically that should not have happened. So the question becomes, how did that happen? And so then that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you on a journey today to try to talk about how it happened. And so I want to talk about the influencers. And as you go through life, you go along your merry way, and then something happens. Life happens. And you get to a point where you got choices. Many choices. You can go in a variety of ways. But usually, somebody appears, puts you on the path you're supposed to follow. Because I believe that we're all, when we're born, we're all here for a purpose. And sometimes life gets in the way and it tries to prevent you from going the way you're supposed to. And you depend on these people that I call the influencers to help you overcome the obstacles and direct you to the path you're supposed to go. So I'm going to spend some time talking about the influencers in my life. This is my, if you can't tell, see there's no gray in this picture. This is my high school graduation picture. And my getting to high school was a challenge. If you look at that, I'm one of those at-risk kids. But I always kept my head down and tried to do the best I could. And the reason for that is because of my maternal grandmother. She only had third grade education. She was a living maid. And in life, one of the lessons she taught me was, when life gets in the way and people do things that bother you or try to direct you in the wrong way, or they do something that hurts you, you never, ever let them see you angry, and you put your head down and you do your work. And if you do what you're supposed to, you will be successful, and you'll prove them wrong. Or you get them back in a way that they never, ever expected you to do that. But you do what you're supposed to. My mother is the smartest person I know from her generation. She did not get to go to college. And my mother and my grandmother worked hard. And they always told me, no matter what, you have to go to college because you have to make sure you can take care of yourself and your responsibilities no matter what is thrown your way. So I was going to go to college. And I had absolutely no idea how to apply to college. So when I applied to college, I applied to those schools that I really loved their football teams. So I applied to USC, UCLA, University of Michigan, Penn State. I got accepted in each and every one of those schools, full ride scholarship. I didn't even go. Why? Because I went to the guidance counselor's office one day and saw this brochure on the table while I was waiting for her, and it was about Fisk University. Never even heard of it. Historically black college. And I started reading about that school and started talking about the Fisk Jubilee Singers. And they're a group of students who the school was in dire financial straits. And they went traveling all over the country and into Europe singing Negro spirituals. And the money they raised, they sent back to the college and saved the college. And I was intrigued with that story, and I said, must be something really special about that college if students are going out to raise money to save the college. So I applied to Fisk. And I got accepted into Fisk. And I went to Fisk, sight unseen. Why? Because my family did not have money for me to go to visit colleges to see whether or not I was going to like them. So you just had to go on faith. And when I got to that campus, and I stepped out of my dad's car, I knew I was supposed to be there. I could feel the history and sense of responsibility and pride of being in an institution like that. And so I had to do well there, not only because of my family history, but because of Fisk's history. And so I'm at Fisk. I went to Fisk intending to major in biology, and I only lasted thinking about majoring in biology a whole half semester. It's because I hated biology. They did not teach biology well back then, and I was telling students today in lunch, they used to just make you memorize stuff. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand why anyone would want to know something like that. And so then I discovered chemistry, and I knew I was supposed to be a chemist. But at Fisk, I had this professor who was my communications professor, speech communications. And her name was Dr. Gladys I. Ford, but we all called her G.I. Ford, and whenever she would turn her back, we would salute. She was the most rigid and scary professor you could ever imagine. And when I was in her class, it was my turn to give my speech on whatever. And I would talk, and then at the end she says, "Oh, Jordan, you're good, but your hands are distracting." So one day during a speech, she actually tied my hands together and I could not move them. It was the worst speech I ever gave. And at the end, when we were talking about it, she's critiquing me, and I was explaining to her that I must have, and I'm not trying to be racist or anything, I says, I think I'm a little bit Italian, because I have to talk with my hands, right? And so then we started talking about all of these things, and then she says, you're very smart. You need to go and apply to the MARC program. And I said, well, what is that? And she says, Minority Access to Research Careers. And I didn't know anything about it. All I know is that Dr. G.I. Ford told me I should go do something, and I said, yes, ma'am, and I went and applied. And when I get there and I'm filling out the application, and then they call me back and they're interviewing me. And they said, as part of the MARC program, we pay your tuition and give you a stipend. Now, I'm on financial aid and doing work study. That sounded good to me, pay tuition, room and board, stipend. But she said, stipend. I didn't know what a stipend was. So I actually had to ask somebody, what is a stipend? But it didn't really matter, because as soon as they said, we pay your tuition, room and board, I knew I was in. And I said, well, what do I have to do? Just got to keep your grades up? I can do that. You got to do research? I didn't know what it was, but I figured I could do that, right? And then she says, you got to go get a PhD in the sciences. Okay, I can do that. Did I know what a PhD in the sciences was? Oh, heck no. But what's the magic? Get some money. So then they tell me I'm in, and then I says, what if I don't do all those things? They said, you have to pay back the money. And I said, all of it? She said, yes. I was like, oh, I better do this, right? And that's how I ended up going to graduate school to get a PhD, because I could not afford to pay back that money. Right? So then, life, I'm telling you. So I apply to graduate schools, and I get, you apply to graduate schools, you get in graduate schools. And I decided to go to Purdue. Why did I go to Purdue? 3 reasons. The first one was I had done research there one summer, and I figured it was okay. Later I realized that the way a college campus looks in the summer is not the way it is in reality. And it's okay, I figured it out. The other reason was because it was in the top 10 of all biochemistry programs in the country. And I figured that that was really going to be important to me in my life. Thirdly, I went there because it was in an isolated location. And I realized that when I was at Fisk, I didn't always study the way I should. And that even though I had good grades, it's probably the world was going to be a little bit harder for me there, because I had to do this research thing and I wasn't exactly sure what it was all about. So I went to Purdue. And I got there, and it was very interesting. The very first day of class. So I went there in the summertime. They have all of these minority serving programs on campus in the summer, and there are fewer students. So it looked to be a very diverse kind of place. And you remember, I went to Fisk. When I graduated, Fisk had 1,200 students total. And the first day of class at Purdue, I walked onto the quad. And the thing I said was, oh my Lord, what have I done? I felt like I was in a sea of white. No one looked like me. And I go to my classes. Nobody in my classes looked like me. And I would sit in the front of the class because I was overachiever. And a professor would come in there and hand out papers. And sometimes I wouldn't get the paper. And how is that possible? And students wouldn't talk to me all the time. So I was isolated. So in the classroom, first of all, I was a chemistry major, and now I'm doing biochemistry, and they're talking about things I don't even understand all the time. But I didn't have anybody to study with. And so you're in that kind of environment where you feel really isolated. That was the worst academic performing semester of my entire life. And I felt that in every room, there was Tuajuanda blood on the walls because I felt like they just picked me up and threw me against those walls all the time. So I didn't do well that semester. I was taking 4 classes. I got 1 B, 2 C's, and an F. I've never gotten an F in my entire life. So what did I do? I got so poor. I had a Sears credit card. And back then, you could use the Sears credit card to rent a car from Budget Rent-A-Car. So I rented a car, drove from Indiana to Virginia. Now my family was in Maryland, but my grandmother was in Virginia. Because I had to go talk to my grandmother to figure out what the heck is going on. Because I did not feel that I belonged. And I felt stupid. And so I spent the night talking to my grandmother. And first of all, she told me I was not stupid, I was incredibly bright. She also made me remember who I am and that I had good family, right? Because back then, my grandmother didn't know anything about genes. She says, look at where you come from. You can do this. Don't let them defeat you. Get your butt back in the car and go back to school. And I went back to school. And I got into the lab of this person, Victor Rodwell, my PhD advisor, who was a saint. In that lab, there were 5 students, all white males in Tuajuanda. And Dr. Rodwell was British, but he was incredibly patient, and he could read me. We would talk in the middle of the night, working late at night in the labs, and he could tell when something was bothering me, and he counseled me, or he sent me to people who could help me. And it's because of him that I got through that PhD program. And my work, I must say myself, was phenomenal. I got 2 first author papers out of my thesis right away that went into the top tier biochemistry journal in consecutive articles in the journal. That was unheard of. And when he used to talk to us, he used to, those 5 white guys and then Tuajuanda, he would say to them, oh, John, you should go work for a pharmaceutical company. Oh, Pete, you should go and work for a research intensive. And then he would say to me, Tuajuanda, you can be a teacher. And I took offense. Because back then, we were in graduate school, we all thought we were going to cure cancer. And why was he telling me to go be a teacher? But you know what? He was right. He was right. Because when I did my postdoc, and the work we did, we thought it was revolutionary. It wasn't revolutionary. It was work. And I find that I was not thrilled with what I was doing at all. It drove me insane. But I was there to do a job, and so I put my head down and I did that job. And then I was somewhere giving a talk. People came up to me afterwards, said, you would be excellent motivation to come speak to our students. Please come. And I went to Xavier. It was the coldest winter in Cincinnati in 150 years because I did my postdoc at the University of Cincinnati. And I get to New Orleans, it is February, it is 75 degrees and sunny. I mean, I get off the plane and I'm taking off stuff because first of all, it's very humid and the sun was out. And I spent these 3 glorious days down there interacting with the students. At the end of my visit, faculty came up to me and said, it's too bad we don't have a job here at Xavier. You would be perfect here. And I said, it's okay, I'm not looking for a job. And within a month and a half, I was called and they asked me to apply, and I went to Xavier and became a biochemist there. And it was the best years of my life teaching at Xavier. But you know, get to Xavier. Are you guys tired of my journey? That's good, because I'm not 40 yet. So I get to Xavier. And you know, when you have your first teaching job, especially if you're coming from a postdoc, postdocs don't normally teach you how to teach. They teach you how to do science, right? And so I get there and I just think I'm big stuff. I'm teaching biochemistry. And that first semester, my students hated me. They said I didn't know what I was talking about. And I didn't know how to teach. What do you mean I don't know how to teach? I give seminars all the time. I know how to present information. That's not teaching. And so I got not stellar at all, midterm evaluations, because I was so cocky that I figured I could do it in the middle of the semester and they're going to be just glorified, and they were god awful. So then I had to go and talk to one of the senior faculty members, Leonard Price, who had been teaching there for 30 years. And he taught me how to present information that was in a format that the students could understand, and to teach and manage the class. So over that Christmas break, what did Tuajuanda do? I went home and redid all of my slides for the entire semester. And that spring semester, I was a new woman teaching. And do I think I did a good job? Yes. How do I know? Because my students still call me and write me and tell me how when I talked about such and such, they still remember it. And they use that example in their lectures now. That some of them still ask me if I have my lecture notes. That's bad. That's 20 years ago, right? But they remember and they keep those notes. That's how I know I made an impact. Then the third name up there, Yeva Politzer. When I got to Xavier, I wrote a research proposal. I got funded to do research. So now I'm really big stuff. I must be really a professor. I'm teaching, and now I'm going to be engaged in funded research. So when I was a postdoc and a graduate student, I would help people write grants, but the labs were already established. You didn't have to build a lab then, but then at Xavier I had to build a lab. And students saw me. I was the first African-American female in the chemistry department at Xavier, a historically black and Catholic college. What's that say? It's a worry. And so when students saw that I was doing research, everybody wanted to do research for me. And sometimes I had 10 students doing research for me. But I didn't know how to mentor students in research, and it was only because of Yeva Politzer that I learned how to mentor. And now I have students who are faculty members who have their own research labs and doing much better than I do. And whenever they encounter problems, they come and talk to me. It's only because of Yeva. She was right across the hallway. And she would hear me in there about to lose my mind. She would just step in. People used to call me TJ back then. It says, TJ, come on into my office. Let's have a glass of sherry for medicinal purposes. That's what she said. And then finally, Ann Barron up here. Ann Barron was the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs, and at Xavier, she recognized something in me and insisted that I go to a workshop for women in higher education administration. And I said no. And the reason I said no, because I was going through personal turmoil. My husband was about to become my husband. And I had 2 children. They were twins. I had to focus on my family. And then a couple of years later, she asked me again. And I got to the point where I had formulated that in for no. But then I said, not a tenured faculty member, you should not keep telling the administrators, no, you need to go do this. And I went and did this program, and I realized I had a knack for this administrative stuff, but they said, Tuajuanda, you can be a college president. And I said, nope, not interested. I am happy in my lab and in my classroom interacting with my students. And I guess I was wrong. Finally, from Xavier, Steve Barkanik, not even at Xavier. Steve must have heard me speak somewhere. And when he did, I must have made an impression to him. So then Katrina happened. My twins and I always left whenever there was going to be a storm coming into New Orleans. Our neighbors used to laugh at us and call us the Northerners. They would say there needs to be 20 feet of water coming off the lake before New Orleans will flood. And what happened? 20 feet of water came off that lake. Did my home flood? No, because we lived on a natural ridge in New Orleans. But we watched the devastation of that storm on television from a hotel suite in Dallas. And we went to Dallas because everybody else went to Atlanta or Houston, and we didn't want to be with all those people. But when we saw the devastation, I realized I couldn't take my twins back to New Orleans, and so we got in the car. Before we did that, when we evacuated from New Orleans, you know how you get these premonitions? Well, we were getting in the car, and then I realized this storm is bad. We went back in, took out all the artwork off the walls, put them in the car, got all of our family photos, which was important because the house did leak because a tree branch fell on the roof and then water got in the house. Everything close to the floor was damaged. But then we leave Dallas, we go to Maryland where my family is, car breaks down. I don't have any money. So we're in Tennessee. We find somebody who fixes the car enough to put a Band-Aid on it to get us to Maryland. By the time I got to Maryland, there was an email from Steve Barkanik in my personal email address offering me an office at HHMI. Why? Because Xavier was one of those really important schools for them, and he knew I was high up in administration. We were going to work to get the college reopened, and he offered me space. That's how I ended up at HHMI. Then we go to New Orleans, it's not good, I'm not taking my kids back. I decided I'm not going to go back. HHMI offers me a job. The world became different. Peter Bruns offered me a position when they found out I was not going to go back to Xavier, and he said, we will offer you a job as a senior program officer. I don't know what that means, but I can do that. And then he says, well, generally these people, senior program officers, manage grants. I was thinking, oh, I don't want to manage grants. They sound incredibly boring to me, but I need money. He says, or you can do something that's different. HHMI always gives money for people to do science education. We want to do something different and be more active. That is riskier. I took the risk. And what happened there? I took the risk at HHMI that Peter provided me this opportunity. And I could talk to you about my science work and about HMG-CoA reductase, the most cool? That's not right. Coolest? That shows my age, huh? Awesome. Enzyme in the world. It is. But I'm going to talk to you about what I did in science education because it's important. So, my association with Peter Bruns, we developed the Science Education Alliance. And this provided access to HHMI resources to a broad array of higher education institutions and students. This is important because HHMI is this philanthropy that funds the best of the best. So they would identify the best institutions and the best individuals and invite them to apply to their initiatives. And for me, I didn't want to do that. It's about access. So I convinced them to let me run my program where I just put an application out there. Anybody who wanted to apply could apply. And after the first year, then I convinced them to let me open it up to any kind of institution. Because at HHMI, they would fund research-intensive institutions and liberal arts colleges. By the time I left, we could fund research-intensive, liberal arts, the comprehensives, and community colleges. That's access. And so when you do that, you provide access to these students. So we brought together scientists and science educators to talk about where science was headed and how to prepare the students to tackle those problems. And it birthed, I don't think that's a real word, but provided broad birth. I thought I was doing the right thing there. It gave rise to the National Genomics Research Initiative, which was a mechanism to introduce students to genomics and bioinformatics. We were in the age of the omics then. It's a national community of undergraduates and faculty working on a given genomics-oriented task under the guidance of somebody called a lead scientist who was remote from the action. It's an authentic research experience that targeted freshmen in college and sometimes sophomores in an introductory laboratory course and exposed them to the process of doing science. This is different. It is a national network of freshmen. And so this initiative challenged conventional wisdom. And that is that laboratory courses must be tied directly to the lectures. People always say the lab enforces what you learn in lecture. I didn't believe it. So we had this to prove it or not prove it. And that research novices or freshmen can't do real research that's relevant to the scientific community. So we had a lead scientist who had a question, something he was working on. And some faculty teams at colleges across the country, and the lead scientist told the faculty what he was interested in. My group developed the teaching materials for the faculty and trained the faculty in all of the techniques that they needed to institute this. Then there were some undergraduates in a year-long course at these institutions across the country, and they formulated testable hypotheses, designed and tested the experiments. And the experiments weren't just kiddie experiments. They were in microbiology, electron microscopy, molecular biology, and bioinformatics. Freshmen. So from this, they generated data, they interpreted the data. They're freshmen, so they have to talk to each other and talk to their professors. The professors talk to the lead scientist. You have a community looking at data. And in that process, the students gained enhancement of their critical thinking and analytical skills, their verbal and written communication. Data got vetted, data got disseminated. Real data that was publishable. So within 3 years, we grew from 12 to 60 colleges and universities. Any kind of school you want to think about, it was in that group. We then had this course implemented as either a replacement for intro bio or in addition to intro bio. And so I really wanted the schools to replace the intro bio, but some of them were overachieving and some of them didn't believe in the concept. So we engaged 3,000 students, freshmen from diverse backgrounds, from 3 different groups. The typical students at the schools, those that were labeled at risk, which I would have been, and honors students. The students got data that they presented at conferences. Faculty published the data on the science and on pedagogy. The impact was that we saw that retention increased of our students in the laboratory. And so we're doing an experiment within an experiment. So the orange bars represent the students that were in my course. The blue bars represent students who were in the comparison group. And it didn't matter which semester we looked at, the students were retained higher in our laboratory course, and even the retention between the semesters were higher than what's normal. So we're at 92% retention between semesters, when the average is between 75 and 80. If you look at their grades in lecture, our students in orange had higher grades in the lecture course than the students who took the intro bio lecture. And if we look at the students who were in the classes where the professors let them just take our course and not take intro, we found that and so 0 represents the class average. So if you were at a school that targeted only students who were in the honors class, and they were in our lab only, they did better than the class average. If you were at a school that targeted their typical student, our students did significantly better than the class average. If you were in a school that targeted at-risk students, they're a little bit below the class average. And so then you can say, well, Tuajuanda, that's not good. They're about a point or two below the class average. Then you didn't help the at-risk students at all. But if we then compare our at-risk students to the comparative at-risk students, you see that we did 15 points better than the average at-risk student in those classes. Finally, if you look at kids, their persistence in science, and this is looking at 2 years of data, you see that students who are in our courses, 92 or 89%, depending on the year, said that they were going to be science majors, because these are freshmen when they started, compared to only 68% of those kids who were not in our course. So the impact on the students were they got better grades in the lab and the lecture. They had enhanced retention in both the lab and in science in general. There were enhanced engagement. You can walk into any one of those schools, and it didn't matter if it's the morning or night, students were talking about science and doing science. They were also reading journals and asking to go to conferences. They were acting like graduate students. And schools actually use this to recruit students to their schools to be scientists. So why is this important? Well, here we're talking about a program that provided access to all students to be engaged in science, and we cultivated their behavior so that they were acting like scientists. And it led to diversification of sciences. Is diversity an issue in the natural sciences? The answer is, well, of course it is. I don't know if you can see this, but so we're looking at whites, African Americans, Native Americans, Asians, and Hispanics, and this is from 2006. You see that the white population was 67% of the US population, Hispanics at 15%, African Americans at 13%. If you look then at the same demographic in science and engineering, you see that whites are overrepresented in science and engineering, that the Asians are overrepresented if you're looking at where they are relative in the general population, and the Hispanics and African Americans are significantly underrepresented in science and engineering. So why is it important that science educators develop programs and curricula that broaden scientific participation? Does anybody know? This is not rocket science. Why do you want the workforce to mirror the demographics of society? Wagner College? Your president and your provost are looking at you? Your faculty are like, come on now. Yes, sir.
To accommodate a wide variety of people.
To accommodate a wide variety of people. And why is that important? It enhances creativity and innovation. You have people around the table with different experiences and perspectives. It really enhances your ability to solve problems. Increases the likelihood of broad-based biomedical research investigations. Are there differences with respect to medicine between the groups and where the funding goes and what people study? Yeah, you study what's relevant to you. Yes?
People can pay their bill better.
So people
pay
can...
the tuition. Like, if they have scientific base, chemistry, they can probably have higher probability to have their scholarship. Like, they are more exercised to the knowledge of science.
That is true. But long term, if you look at how much money people earn in their career, people in sciences come out initially earning more, but over the lifetime, it sort of balances out. So you just got to be patient, I guess. And hopefully everybody can pay their bill. It also facilitates social justice and equity. So what if one decides you don't want to pursue a career in science? I think we still can proclaim success if we've cultivated your scientific temper. And that is a phrase that was coined by the Prime Minister of India in 1950 when he was looking at the situation of his people and realized that they were having economic problems and he had to do something to raise the standard of living and what was going on in that country. And so the scientific temper is really to foster creativity amongst the people. Scientists are very rational, so get people to behave and think rationally, because usually when there's a problem, your first response is always emotional, and then you have to get past that so that you're rational can figure these things out. Scientists are open to differences. It really enhances creativity and problem solving, and they're tolerant of those differences. And if you have people in general just thinking this way, I think that some of the problems that we encounter would be less, and that we can get some of these things solved in an efficient kind of way. And it definitely seemed to have helped in India. When he started this, they were clearly third world, and now they're anything but third world. They're clearly first world. So today our conversation began by talking about this person who was underrepresented minority and at risk, and how this person, Tuajuanda Jordan, became a college president. But really, this story is not about what Tuajuanda has done. It really is about, I know, I thought that was cool. It is about the people who helped me to realize my potential and what was in me all the time. And so that is the reason why when you are on a path and things seem troubled or life gets in the way, somebody usually appears to help you circumvent and put you on the path that you should be on. That's why it's so important to always do your best and to listen to people as they provide advice to you. And that's why I say nature always finds a way. And it takes on many forms and can come at any time. I thank you for your attention and your patience, and I'm willing to answer any questions or comments you may have. Yes.
What was one of your hardest obstacles to overcome?
I think, there are a couple. When I was in graduate school, I was not used to failure. And trying to find what I call safe space while I was at Purdue, where I could just let my hair down and be Tuajuanda. So the year I started, I was the only Black person who was admitted to biochemistry. But there were 13 Black people who had been admitted to biology. And they were in a different building. And so there were days that it was just very tough being a Black woman in that environment. And you lived to go to the grad house at night and all congregate in one room, and we could just let our hair down and be ourselves. And then the next tough part was being a young faculty member trying to get tenure and be everybody's super person. The female students looked up to me and had great expectations. My family always had great expectations, and trying to balance the demands of my career with being a single parent of twins, young twins, that was incredibly hard for me. So trying to find that work-life balance is still hard. So those are challenges. Yes?
Of all the people in your life that influenced you, which one influenced you the most?
My grandmother, without a doubt. She just had this inner strength and dignity that was amazing to me. And for someone who had third grade education and the things she did for her family, that was my mentor and my role model. Yes.
But everything that you had going on, like from work, study, school, and everything, how did you balance everything out? And did you still have time for like a social life?
Of course I had time for a social life. That's why I went to Purdue, so I wouldn't have a social life, right? I was one of those students who people always saw me as quiet. And if you didn't know me, you just thought I was always very serious. But those who knew me knew that I was anything but. And for me, I always, even when I was in high school, it's being recorded. I had 2 sets of friends. Because in my school, they tracked you. So I was in the smart group. And in those classes, none of my friends, my close friends, were in that group. So in the daytime, I had to be all serious and studious. And at night, after I finished my homework, always do your homework first. Then you can go out and have fun and not feel guilty, right? You might look bad the next day, but at least you got your work done, right? And so even when, Fridays come, and you guys aren't at HBCU, but when I was in that school, Friday nights were special. I mean, all kinds of stuff happened. And some mornings you'd wake up and there are just people in your room, just whatever. But I would always get up, especially after I got into the MARC program. Saturday mornings, I was up by 6 o'clock at the latest, get dressed, go to the lab. And when I came back, 1, 2 o'clock, I'd had a full day. Everybody else is just getting out trying to do stuff, but I wasn't going to get caught in that. So it's about prioritizing and staying organized. That's the only way you can do it. That's it.
Yes.
Thank you for coming first off. And
You're welcome.
you have done so many great things. I'm just curious to know what is the next step in life for you? I know your motivation was first to pay back the money, and then to put food on the
No, it
table.
was not to have to pay back the money.
So I guess what's next?
I don't know. After I realized that there were things called careers and just not jobs, that I thought that I was going to be a provost, and I was going to be very happy being a provost. But now I'm a president, and people consider that to be the top of this academic thing. I know that at St. Mary's College, I feel like I am home. And college presidents don't usually last very long these time. 5 to 7 years is the average, I think, now. But if I have the opportunity, I would love to stay at St. Mary's. It is the perfect institution for me. Do I think that I might get bored? I don't know how you get bored being a college president. But do I think I might do something else? Probably, because even when I was doing research, I would always be doing 2 projects at once, because I can't just do one thing. But I would like to get to the point where I can just start ticking things off my bucket list, and to enjoy life. So that's what I'm trying to, I would love to get to 70 and be able to retire and then go, and maybe by then I'll have enough money to buy a real race car. Have the money to buy that airplane, right? Those kinds of things, so I can have some fun. I think that's what it's about right now.
Carrie?
That actually was my question.
Oh.
During your time in college and everything, when you were in stressful situations or things were overwhelming, what would you do to kind of pick yourself up?
I am I'm an adrenaline junkie, and so, and I was too poor in college to have a car. But but oftentimes I would be dating somebody that had a great car. I know. And so I drive, right? That's where I release my energy. I used to, when I was in graduate school, I played on multiple intramural and city volleyball teams. And I used, back then I was thin, but I was strong, right? And I used to wear a headband that said TJ the Meek. And so people would see me step on the court and they didn't know, but I had the most wicked serve. And I could hit any position on the court with my serve. And if it was a bad day in lab, or if my professor or somebody made me upset, I would imagine that ball was their face. And he would just pound the ball, right? So I always had to do something physical or drive. And usually I drive with music. I really love jazz. It takes me to a different place, and it helps me to refocus.
Dr. Who?
I'm not so sure if the question made a lot of sense. Based on your experience and which job is more challenging, being a scientist or being a college president?
College president, without a doubt. And the reason I say that is, and I was telling the group today that as a scientist, you have an opportunity to reflect and to imagine and design, run the experiment in a controlled environment, get your data, you reflect, you tweak. And you can eventually get things, figure it out so things work. Or if they don't work, you can reason why they're not working. But as a president, you have no control over anything. And it's just chaos sometimes. And you don't have any control over your calendar. And there's this thing called humans. And you can't control them. Right? And so something happens, and it's just over. And so that you can't predict. Well, you can, but you can't control. And you have to be up all the time, and your times for reflection, it's in the wee hours of the night or the morning, depending on what you call that darkness that everybody else is asleep. And it's the hardest job I've ever had. And it is the best job I've ever had. Yep.
Yeah, I think by studying chemistry, it's talk about what is this world made of. I'm just wanted to know what is the most thought-provoking part of studying chemistry by studying chemistry, as thought-provoking. Is there something related to it? Because by studying chemistry is about to wonder about what is this world are made of, right? So is that something like transcendental feeling, or you understand this world better? What's your worldview? Worldview after studying chemistry and before studying chemistry, is there a change in your worldview?
Oh man, I can't remember my worldview before I started studying chemistry. It's been like decades or something. But I don't know. I think that being a scientist has helped me be an administrator, because you encounter problems all the time, and it's about creative problem solving, right? And that when I'm trying to solve some situation, you have people around the table that agree with you, those that think like you, and then those who don't think like you, and then those who absolutely disagree with you. it's always important to have that good mix, because then you hear all voices, and the solution you come up with tries to take into account all those things. And that's something that I learned when I was a biochemist designing experiments, the controls.
Different variable.
Different variables. That's exactly right. You're a chemistry major?
No, I'm not.
You should be a chemistry major.
I think about it.
You think about it. That's a good thing.
Yes.
The people that most influenced you along the way, what were some of the characteristics in them that made you want to work with them?
Great sense of humor, good human beings, right? Kind and ethical, deep thinkers. I think that's the common thread between all of them. When you see them and you mention a name to people and someone says, he's a great guy, right? Or she's a wonderful woman, they just exude that kind of stuff. I think that's what ties me to most of my close friends and colleagues.
Kind of going off of that, you mentioned having faith in your influencers and your path. Was there ever a time where you were unsure of the path that you chose and the way that your influencers pushed you?
Graduate school.
Yeah. Or graduating college?
Or graduating college, you said?
Like your pathway afterwards?
You know, when I was in college, I was pretty certain about my path. Because I came alive when I was doing chemistry. And when I did biochemistry, it made the biology make sense, right? And that's when I knew I was in my element. But then when I went to graduate school, it made me doubt everything. And so I did question my grandmother. Why would she send me back to that place? But she was right. She was right. So if you trust them and if you consider somebody to be your influencer, you have to trust them.
Hi. As a Black woman, how do you negotiate spaces where you're the only one? Especially today, similar to how you negotiated that in Purdue when you first got there. How does that look for you today?
Well, that is a hard question because I don't have any comparison, right? I've always been a Black woman. And I would say that even though it does not matter what your position is, people are going to look at you and see Black woman before you even open up your mouth. So it is about being confident in who you are and what you know. That helps. That my grandmother teaching me to keep my mouth shut when I'm ticked off helps. I know that one time I was at a college in New Jersey giving a keynote. And I don't think I dressed like the wait staff. And it was keynote over lunch. And I'm standing by the wall trying to get my thoughts together. And this person came up to me, one of the faculty at that school, and asked me, where could he get a tray? Because he thought I was the wait staff. But I remember my grandmother, and you could have seen that man's face when they introduced me and I stood up at the mic, right? And when I started talking, I just kept looking. I'm not kidding. It was one of those talks that I had the worst eye contact with anybody else because I was just zoned in on him. And that gave me satisfaction. So, so when I talk about being confident, it's not about being cocky, right? You always have to be prepared and know what you know. And then also know what you don't know. And if you don't know something, what should you do? Shut up, right? And that's a fine line. People don't always understand that, but I absolutely practice that every day.
What were some of the teaching techniques that you changed after your first semester?
Don't make it a seminar. So I stopped. So, all right. First of all, back then, they didn't have all these fancy whiteboards and stuff like that, right? So it's chalkboards. And I wore a suit to work every day. I was not going to look like my other colleagues in the department. Right? And so you would start writing on the board, and they would have dustless chalk. There's no such thing as dustless chalk. And it would be all over my clothes. And so within a couple of weeks, I put everything on transparencies. And it was just filled with all this stupid, just verbiage everywhere. Well, students not going to learn from that. And so one of the things I started doing was, I'm very visual. So things were visual, very few words on my slides. And then, I put something leading statements, whatever it is I'm talking about. And then the key piece of that information would not be on the handout. So they had to pay attention. But I put all the nonsensical stuff so that they wouldn't think they had to write down everything that I was saying on the paper so they could listen. And then when I said something important, they would pause and they would write it down. I also engaged people more in conversation. I would ask, like today I only asked you guys one question. Good thing. I think we'd still be trying to get through those slides if I'd asked you any more, right? But constantly asking students questions and telling them it's not rhetorical. Or if I saw somebody who was nodding off, I'd just go sit by him and in the class, right? And then sometimes give them an opportunity to do the teaching because they could do it better than I could. Or always bringing in some kind of toy to try to model what I was talking about. And to have a sense of humor. Didn't have to be serious. I'm not serious. And so there's this one section of biochemistry I hated teaching, carbohydrates. You're trying to teach them the basic structure of a carbohydrate. You don't get much more boring than that. Hydroxyl up, hydroxyl down, who cares? And so then, during the middle of this, you go so far into this, and then when I had it to the point where I could not take it anymore, I would hit the button on my computer and a little cartoon would pop up. And it was this bald-headed man sitting at his desk, and he just flips up a sign, and I had written on it, I can't take it anymore. And then his head would hit the table, right? And that was comic relief. So those were things that I would use in the class to try to engage the students.
Oh, yes, Dr. Benson.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts with the background of all of the criticism of higher education in this country about the future of the university and the college.
So is the question, do I have the future, the viability?
No, people are asking the question, is college worth the money? Are students learning anything there? I'm sure you're familiar with the book Academically Adrift.
Yes.
In that context, what are your reflections?
People are learning that sometimes the model of our colleges have to be tweaked. We have to think about what we're doing. But not all students who come out of college are academically adrift. And sometimes we just have to provide them better guidance while they're there to help them to see how they can utilize this education once they get out. So I don't think that we should all be training students, giving them job skills. Those are not lifelong things. You have to go back and be retrained by somebody else. We need to help our students to figure out how to think and to apply what they've learned. I think that Students these days, you can't depend on any kind of job, so you have to learn how to be entrepreneurial. So what do you need to be entrepreneurial? You have to be creative and think outside the box and know this, that, and the other. So I don't think that it's the end of higher ed. I think that every facet of higher ed has its niche, and that every student should be afforded the opportunity to find what works best for them without dictating what it should look like.
Let's all thank Dr. Jordan for such. Thank you very much for your message that has such relevance for all of us, Dr. Jordan.